BBC Radio Solent.
Loving life in the south.
On the 14th of June 1968, Robin Knox Johnston set sail from Falmouth. It would be another 312 days before he'd set foot on dry land again, back in Falmouth.
This is the moment. We've waited for since Friday and Saturday, and Robin Knox Johnston and Suhaili have sailed non-stop around the world.
I'm Neil Sackley, and to mark this unique anniversary, I've been talking to Sir Robin. We chat about his epic voyage, why he did it, the times he thought he would die, why he felt like giving up, and why he didn't. We'll look at his logbook and set sail on Suhaili, finding out what life was like on board the 32-foot ketch. This is Robin Knox Johnston, a force of nature.
BBC Radio Solent.
Well, we lived alongside the Dee, so one was aware of boats. On occasion went into Liverpool so we could sort of see massive shipping in those days. But it wasn't really till I was 8 that it started seriously, and from then on, really, I was going to go to sea. And once you've shown an interest, it makes it very easy for aunts and uncles for Christmas and birthdays to give you books about the sea. So they started programming you, and by the time I was 14, that was it. I was definitely going to sea.
Robin joined the Merchant Navy, spending 8 years working for the British India Company on the shipping routes around India, East and South Africa. And it was whilst in the Merchant Navy he took on any available opportunity to sail, eventually commissioning his own boat to be built.
And that's Suhaili, and we laid her keel in 1963. It took a bit of time to get started because the police wouldn't let the log that was going to make the keel, it was 22 feet long, this keel, solid teak. They wouldn't let it move till after 6. The customs knocked off at 6. But 20 rupees stopped with that. Got the customs officer to stay on.
And where was she built?
She built in Bombay, in basically the middle of the docks, Modi Hard, which has disappeared now. I've been back to look for it. And built on very traditional Indian lines, although it was an American design, in fact. They built it their way, which was quite interesting to watch. And when I was in port, I'd go down and sort of give a hand. And then once I left the ship, signed off, finally, I was full-time working on it with the other two. The other two were third officers. And we were, 3 of us got on with it.
Was she built to a recognised design, or was she a one-off, a bespoke?
No, we bought the design through a firm in Poole. She was designed by Chuck Atkins in the States, and a number of them have been built. In fact, one's just been built. Is coming to do this race this year. And we got the plans. They weren't the ones we ordered, but we looked at it and said, looks seaworthy. Looked quite like a ship's lifeboat, actually. I thought, well, let's build that. We can't hang around. We've got to get started on this. We want to sail next year. So those are the plans we built Suhaili to.
And how long did she take to build?
Well, she should have been finished by 1964, but actually it wasn't until 65. Late 64 we launched her. We hadn't finished her. But the other two wanted to pull out by then. You know, they both got girlfriends in Australia and New Zealand. So I bought them out with a loan from the bank and packed the boat up, came home, took a master's ticket, went into the Navy for 5 months, waited for the season really. I was waiting for the northeast monsoon. Nothing else I could do till that came through. And then went out with new crew, which was my brother and a friend, and we finished her off and set off for Arabia.
So from laying the keel to launching, what period of the time?
2 and a bit years.
And where did the name come from?
Well, Suhail is a star, one of the navigation stars, and it's roughly sort of northwest. So the wind in the Persian Gulf, where I've been working for 4 or 5 years, they named this particular wind the Suhaili. And I thought, well, actually, that's the direction of England. My wife's name was Sue, so it seemed a sort of tactful thing to do. And I used to actually write it in Arabic on the bow. I've got it written down somewhere, but just haven't got wrapped up around to doing it.
It took 18 months to sail Suhaili back to the UK, where Robin rejoined the company. Later, as a Royal Navy reservist, he trained on an anti-submarine frigate. Then, in 1967, something happened that would change his life.
That was when, of course, Chichester got back. He stopped once in Australia, but it was an incredible voyage. And I think anyone vaguely interested realised that left one thing to be done, and that was to go non-stop. And the idea sort of fixed on me, really.
So what came first, your desire to sail non-stop or the Sunday Times challenge?
I was writing a book about the voyage back from India, which I've never finished, actually. And my agent rang him up and said, I'm not going to finish that because I'm going to do something else. He said, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to try and beat Chichester. He said, what are you going to do for money? I said, rob a bank, I'm going. And he put it to the Sunday Times. And they sent a journalist down to talk to me, and he said, you know, you're going to beat Chichester. I said, don't know, hope so. Which was honest. But of course that isn't what the journalist wanted. He wanted me to say, oh, I'll beat that old so-and-so. So they decided that I didn't stand a chance, so don't bother with me. But then they realised there were other people thinking of doing it, so they announced on the 17th of March 1968 that I was in a race they were organising. I never actually entered it. I was in it.
Why hadn't it been done non-stop? Why couldn't Chichester do it?
He needed to repair his boat, and I don't think people realise what an incredible voyage that was at the time, to go halfway around the world without a stop. That was pushing the frontiers. And I don't think anyone in their right mind thought it was possible to go any further. Most people didn't think he'd get that far. But he did. And I think it opened our eyes to saying, well, he got that far. Okay, his boat needed repair. He needed a break. But could we double that? And that's the unanswered question at the time.
Well, of course, the 60s was an era of technological advances. Were there any advances there that enabled it to be thought to be able to be done?
I think the biggest advance was the invention by Hasler, you know, the Cockershell Heroes Hasler, of self-steering vanes. And that was a breakthrough. And that led to people being able to consider single-handed sailing seriously. Up to then, it had been a bit hit and miss, because unless you get your boat to balance, it just wasn't possible. And of course now it's electronic anyway.
You said that you wanted to go one better. Did you ever have any doubts that it could be done?
Neil, I was 28, 29. You know, I'm a master mariner. I've been a captain by then. I felt I had as good a chance as anyone else I'd heard of achieving it. And I just felt this is something I've really got to try and do. I don't want to be 90 looking into the shaving mirror and saying, I wish I'd done that. I've got to go out and try this, whatever it takes.
What was more important for you, sailing around the world or sailing around the world non-stop?
Oh, the objective was non-stop, always was. I felt with Suhaili, which I knew well by then, if any boat could do it, she could, if it was possible. What we didn't know is whether it was possible in such a small boat.
What would be her natural environment then?
Her natural environment to be pottering around the coast. I mean, that's what she was built for, designed for. You see, she was so well built, she was so solid. I mean, she was solid teak throughout. Planking 1.25 inches, deck 1.25 inches. She was a very solid boat. Someone said when I sailed, if that boat hits England, I'm sorry for England. And there's a certain amount of truth in it.
So how much of her is still original?
Most. That's all original, deck's original. Cabin top, the hull, masts and rigging, no. Sails, no. All the interior's new.
So you were intent on doing it no matter what. What impact on your projects did the Sunday Times coming on board have?
Not very much on my project. It didn't lead to anyone suddenly saying, oh, let's help you and give you some money or some kit. I very much was left to just get on with my own preparations, which actually suited me. I didn't want to be interrupted. No, it didn't bother me. I'm getting on with this.
So although not a race in the traditional sense where you're all starting at the same time, it was point to point.
Once we'd said we're going to go when we're ready, they said there'll be a trophy for the first boat home, thinking everyone would start together. Well, once that happened, they had to change it. So then they said, OK, there's a trophy for the first boat to get back whenever you start, And then there's a monetary prize for the person who does it in the shortest time. So they changed the prizes, if you like, at that stage.
So what was more important to you, first or fastest?
First. Fastest, I wasn't going to be fastest anyway, not with Suhaili. But first, definitely. But I didn't think I would be. I thought there's bigger boats there, faster boats. But I'm probably the one who will slog on. And, of course, actually, that's what happened. They all fell out.
Of the 9 people that started, who were the biggest threat?
The biggest threat, in theory at the beginning, was Alex Caruzzo, the Italian, because he had a 60-foot boat, and he was undoubtedly, had it all gone well for him, been the fastest. Unfortunately, he got very ill and had to pull out into Lisbon very early on. After that, the most experienced sailor was Bernard Matessier, the Frenchman. He and I were by far the most experienced ocean sailors in that event. And he had a bigger boat than me. I knew of his experience. I knew what he'd done with that boat. He'd been around the world with it. So he knew what he was taking on. Therefore, he was the threat as far as I was concerned.
Did you know what you were taking on?
No, not completely. No, I mean, I knew what the Atlantic was like. I'd sailed it. But once you got into the Southern Ocean, you're getting 27-metre high waves. You're getting spindrift coming off, which blinds you. It's being blown so hard. Wind can go from force 2 to force 10 in about 10 minutes. The waves then change. You get cross seas, huge waves breaking. It's a mean, miserable, nasty, cold place. And I think Chichester summed it up. He said, you don't measure the weather in the Southern Ocean in knots and the size of the waves. You measure it in degrees of fear. It's rather a good remark.
So you didn't manage to secure any sponsorship for your projects. What preparations did you have to do?
Well, I had to get the boat ready. I had to invent my own self-steering gear because I couldn't use the hazard system because my mizzen boom sticks out over the stern. I had to work out all the food I'd want. I reckon 300 days with 10% for errors. How am I going to charge the batteries? Need to make a generator, which I made out of 2 motor engine and 2 dynamos. Think of everything you might need for 10 months. Everything I might need to keep the boat going. What happens if I get a hole in the boat? How am I going to fix it? Right, I need to take this. Where do I stow it? I'll put it there. Okay, but if there's a hole in the boat, I can patch it up. Because once you've started on a thing like this, you're not pulling out. That's letting down the you who's got that far. And if you're a bit tired and feeling a bit, negative, well, have a good sleep and get up and deal with it, which is very much my approach to this sort of thing. And so, once I'd started, I was going. That was it. Now, barring anything going wrong with the boat or myself, I was just going. That was it.
So did you choose to go from Falmouth, or did Falmouth choose you?
Oh, no, Falmouth didn't choose me at all. In fact, they tried to order me out. I chose Falmouth because it's the furthest west, and therefore I'm not single-handing in the more crowded waters of the English Channel for very long. So Falmouth was a logical place for me to depart from.
So the routing you took, it's a very deliberate route, isn't it?
I took the old sailing ship route, when we traded with square riggers, because the winds are favourable. The wind's more behind you, therefore it's easier sailing. And Suhaili doesn't sail close to the wind anyway. Basically, you're just using the weather systems to give yourself favourable winds as often as you can. Can't get it right all the time. Sometimes the weather will change on you, but on balance, you get the winds with you more than against you.
What do you remember of the day you left?
The day I left, I'd reached the point it was time to go. We can hang around. There's always a nervousness about leaving, apprehension. That's, I think, natural. But I realised I can't keep hanging around here. I've just got to go. I'm ready, so let's go. I was conscious the other 2 had already started, and I didn't want them to get too much of a lead. So I said, right, I'm off. And really, I think the drawn look on my parents' faces and that sort of feeling, God, look what I'm doing to them. But, I thought, well, they've got 3 other sons. What are they worrying about?
And was there ever a point where you thought, I'm not going to put my family through this?
No, I was a bit selfish about that. I'd made my mind up to go. And I think sometimes you've just got to make that decision. Would they have really liked me to have pulled out once I'd made my mind up about it? The disappointment the rest of my life thinking I could have done that, I don't think they would. So, no. Now there's all the background on the boat. You refer to, anyone picks it up, they can see where the boat's registered and everything else. This is just common stuff which is available to most people. And then you get into the bit that you actually keep. This is
day one.
This is the day I sailed.
So it slips at 13:45?
Yeah. 1500 got through on the radio, so I'm using the radio then, but I'm not very far away. This is going, and I've just put that in, but I'm really quite busy because I'm close to land. Next day, not so much in. It was probably up most of the night because I'm close to land. And then it starts to get sorted out, and I'm beginning to get settled into my normal routine.
You're listening to Robin Knox Johnston, A Force of Nature, a special programme marking the 50th anniversary of his epic voyage.
BBC Radio Solent.
And was there a big send-off?
Not really, no. I mean, I set off, I think people see me off of mother and father and my brother, Mike, Sunday Mirror, 3 of them, 2 from Castles, chap from the Sunday Times. And that was basically it. There was no big waving off, you know, that sort of thing. 1 or 2 people from the pub probably sort of saw me off, not thinking too much about it. We weren't making a huge thing about it, you see, because we hadn't done it. The world's full of people telling you what they're going to do. Well, actually go and do it and then tell me about it. There's far too many people, daydreamers, saying, well, I'd have done that, but. Yeah, the but. You're the but. You're the ones causing but. If you really want to do it, you'll do it. And so I wanted to do it, but I wasn't making a big fuss about it.
And who else were you leaving behind?
Well, I was divorced by then, so I was leaving a little girl behind. Not that she understood at least what was going on. She was 5, so she didn't really understand it at all. But, you know, I was leaving her behind, and I was very fond of her, obviously. And I knew I'd miss her for the year. But, you know, being at sea, you're away so much. I mean, you get used to not seeing your family for months at a time. You come back and find a 3-year-old's 4, and their characters developed. Oh, they've learned these words. You miss all that wonderful period of growing up. But that's, I'm afraid, one of the sacrifices a seaman makes.
You talked earlier on about what you were going to take. Can you give us an idea of what the provisions were?
Well, it was mainly in tins, because we didn't have freeze-dried food in those days. So, you know, a couple of 100 tins of bully beef, a couple of tins of stewed steak, baked beans, peas, beans, carrots, potatoes. Take fresh food and hope it lasts. 2 months would probably be maximum. Eggs, all greased in Vaseline, but they lasted about 2 months. And after that, you're on what you've got. But it's all in tins. Now, tins won't survive in a boat because they'll rust. And then eventually you hear this hissing noise, and that's the gas created by the contents escaping. So you have to treat them. And I coated them in white paint, took the labels off, and then varnished them to make them last longer. But even so, I mean, towards the end I was getting a lot of tins. I mean, every night I'd hear a couple hissing.
And how much space did that take up?
Well, when I sailed, you couldn't actually stand up in the middle of the cabin. Well, from there to there was solid, with containers of water, paraffin, petrol for the generator, and such like. Up the front was shelves. I took out the bunks and put shelves in, so all my food was up there, the fresh food was up there, potatoes, onions, that sort of thing. And then in these lockers here, they were full of tins, and there were more tins up front as well. These bunks were still clear, but the outer bunks were full of stores. If you look at Suhaili now and see the distance between the water and the gun, you'd think it's about 2.5 feet. Well, it was 1 foot 10 when I sailed, with the weight of stores I got on board.
What were the biggest challenges you faced?
Initially, taking it very easy, because I got another attack of jaundice. And I knew if I went to hospital, they'd hospitalise me. I had to go then. So for the first month I wasn't pushing very hard. And then I started, the signs disappeared and I felt better and I started to push a bit more. I think there's the apprehension, you know, will the boat take it? Will I take it? You know, I think I will. But what have I forgotten that the boat might have to put up with? Can the boat take a wave hitting us sideways? No, I knew she'd been hit, I'd been with her when she'd been hit before, but how many of them can she take? Will she get swamped by a wave in the Southern Ocean? You know, the wave completely covers the boat, which happened. What will happen when that does happen? Well, actually, she just bobs up. All that was in the future. That was all stuff I was going to have to find out as I went along. I didn't know for certain what it was going to be like. So, you know, as well, what's that going to be like when I get down there? You know, you're pushing on, but at the same time you're thinking, I'm getting close to the Southern Ocean. I'm getting close to the Southern Ocean. What's it going to be like? I mean, the first 10 days in the Southern Ocean, I had 6 gales. It was that bad. And it was September, you see, I was early, deliberately. But I hadn't anticipated that. That's when I lost my fresh water, smashed up the self-steering, and the cabin top shifted, and eventually led to me losing the radio. You know, got knocked over. And cross sea, you've never seen cross seas like it. They're huge. And the poor little boat's trying to cope with them. And it wasn't till a much bigger gale later on I worked out how to get her comfortable in those conditions. And it was literally, if I hadn't been there, I wouldn't have worked it out. And it was, so, you know, thinking she's not going to take much more of this, she's going to break up. What can I do? And I came up with an idea and tried it, and it worked. And after that, actually, I got my best sleep when I was in really bad seas. There was nothing I could do. I've got the boat comfortable, I go to bed and get some rest.
How scared were you?
Neil, you're inevitably, there are times, but you know, when a big wave's coming towards the boat, it's too late to be scared. Now you've got to deal with it. You know, on one occasion I saw one coming and I realised I couldn't get down inside the boat where I'd be safe. I was on deck, I'd get washed off, no question. I went up the rigging just to get out of the wave, and the whole boat disappeared. I mean, the wave just covered her completely. That had happened to me when I'd been in the cockpit before, and you just get smashed up against the front and bruised, you know, inevitably. It's too late to be scared when that happens. You're looking at it and say, oh, wish I wasn't here. Well, it's a bit too late to make that, say that, isn't it? I'm here. I've got to deal with it. What am I going to do? And I think your mind's clicking on what to deal with the problem, not, you know, if you stand there being petrified, you're not going to do anything. You probably will get killed.
Well, that storm is depicted by a painting by Gordon Frickers. The painting hangs in Sir Robin's sitting room.
Now, this is what I was talking about, and the artist has done his best to try and, you know, show what happened. Basically, this wave, and it was bigger than that, was coming, and it was breaking at the top. And I saw it coming towards the boat and realised I'd be swept off, because I was up forward doing something. And so I went shimming up the mast. And so the wave broke over the boat disappeared, and there's just me and 2 masts, nothing in sight for 1,500 miles. And then, of course, the boat shook herself and up she popped. And the reason why she didn't broach is you can just see that blue line there. That's the warp I had out astern, which was stopping her from swinging round in front of the wave. If she'd done that, I'd been dismasted.
That's a rope break?
It was a rope break, exactly that, yeah. Anyway, once the wave passed, you know, I came down, found the wave had knocked the hatch open. About 3 tons of water had gone down below, so the next 3 hours I'm bailing with a bucket. They say the best bilge pump is a frightened man with a bucket. So, yeah.
So how frequent were situations like this?
They got less, although that took place in the Pacific, in fact. They got less as I went on, as we got more into the summer. But in the early days, when I got round Cape of Good Hope, this was happening reasonably frequently. And if I was steering, one of those hit. I mean, I'd have a line round my waist, tie me onto the boat, because, you know, you can be drifted off so easily. I mean, I'd be just slammed up the front jet, and you just pick yourself up. God, nothing broken, okay, let's carry on. Nothing much you can do about it.
Is this the point where you're thinking, why did I set off and do this?
No. Right that moment I'm saying, I hope the wave doesn't reach this high and drop me off here. But actually, nearer the horn, I was down below doing nothing, and suddenly there was an almighty crash. And I thought, God, and you could hear the mast doing this. Oh, come on, the mast's broken. Shut up on deck. The mast is fine, it's just vibrating. And there was this albatross, just swinging. Oh, didn't hurt. He'd flown straight into my forestay. Thought he'd broken the mast.
You're listening to Robin Knox Johnston, A Force of Nature, a special programme marking the 50th anniversary of his epic voyage. And how were you bearing up?
I was doing fine, actually. You know, I had a few problems inevitably. I mean, battery acid in the eye hurts a bit. And it stopped me seeing for about a week in one eye. Bruised, inevitably. You keep bashing yourself. Repairing sails down the south, I mean, I had to bang your hands to bruise them so you could use a needle. It's so cold. And I didn't have any gloves, and I couldn't have worked with the gloves anyway. You know, porous oilskins, eventually cut holes in the bottom of my boots to let the water out. But, you know, this is inevitable. And you just say to them, look, oh, this is miserable. You know, I'm cold, I'm wet, I've got bruises here where it chafes on my oilskins. So, you know, the blisters are burst and that's not healing. The salt's stinging it. I've been damp for 5 months now, all my clothing's been damp. And you say, well, yeah, but hang about. If this was easy, someone else would have done it. I've got this opportunity. So stop whinging, get on with it.
And how were you mentally?
Well, this is the great problem. You're your own judge of your mental ability. But if you've got a mental problem, how do you know the judge is any good? So you have to sort of try and keep your mind active. And I took to learning poetry. I mean, at one time I could recite the whole of Gray's Elegy, which I learned.
Tolls the knell of parting day. The lowing herd winds slowly o'er the lea. The ploughman homeward plods his weary way, and leaves the world to darkness and to me. Now fades the glimmering landscape on the sight, and all the air a solemn stillness holds.
You know, I was doing things like that to keep my mind active. I was forcing myself to use my mind because I thought when I get back I'll be 30. I've got to go back to work. And, you know, I've got to be in a state to do it. I mean, there's no guarantee of instant fame or anything like that with this voyage. Just get home, park the boat up and go back to work. And so I needed to keep my mind active. Now, to a certain extent, I mean, things like navigation in those days with no satellites. You know, you're doing it with a sextant, you've got to do the calculation. That keeps you active, working all that out. So you've got a certain amount of mental work, but I wanted to add to it, so I done poetry.
Slow through the churchway path we saw him borne. Approach and read, for thou canst read the lay, graved on the stone beneath yon aged thorn.
In your log, July the 13th, you talk about springing a leak in shark-infested waters.
Oh, well, no, it wasn't springing a leak, she was leaking. I mean, it was regular. It was about 200 gallons a day, which is a lot. I thought, well, I can't go in the Southern Ocean like this, I've got to stop it. And I searched around for some of the things I brought on board just to deal with emergencies, and realised I had some copper that I could tack over the seam that was leaking. But it was about 4.5, 5 feet underwater. So you go down, get a tack in, come up for air, go down, put another tack in, keep the hammer on a bit of string so it's down there anyway, ready for you. I was working away, and then I was aware of this grey shape swimming around me. Now it wasn't excited, it was just curious, so that's all right. So I went on for a bit longer, and then it started to get a bit more jerky, and I thought, time to get out. So I climbed out of the water, and of course it wouldn't go away. Well, I've got this half-attached piece of copper. I can't afford to lose it. That shark is stopping me, so he's got to go. So I threw some lavatory paper in the water, and the scavengers, he came up thinking it was white meat, and his head broke the surface, I shot him. And I waited half an hour just to make sure blood and stuff hadn't attracted mates to come and eat him and perhaps me at the same time. And I went back and finished the job. But it was no choice. I mean, he had to go. He was threatening me.
And was that the only time that you had to leave the boat?
Oh no, I used to dive off to keep fresh. I mean, when the water was warm, I'm not stupid. No, I'd dive off the bow if she was going up to about 2 or 3 knots. 3 knots would be pretty well maximum. You can put yourself back on board about 4.5 knots, but it's very hard, and I was strong then. But I didn't usually risk it. So I'd dive off the bowsprit, swim like hell until the stern came along, climb back on board, get out the seawater soap, cover myself in soap, and then dive off the bowsprit and fresh off, and climb back on board. But I had a rope out the stern in case, just in case I missed the stern of the boat. But otherwise, the only time I dived was to repair the self-steering in the Southern Ocean. God, that was cold. It was freezing. I was losing feeling, and I knew I had to do the job quickly. That was cold.
And how easy is it to sail on our own?
Once I'm clear of land, very easy. The problem comes when I'm close to land. The great thing about Suhaili is she's simple. Make sure it's clear. The first human contact I had for 147 days, actually, apart from on the radio until it broke, was the pilot vessel off Melbourne. And I sailed up to him, and it was quite a reasonably calm day. And so this little boat comes up with its signal flags up, British flag, and he looked down and said, yeah. I said, hello mate, will you take my mail? He said, no, clear off. I said, look, I'm 147 days out from the UK. I wonder if you could report me and take some mail and stuff. He said, where are you from? I said, England. Ah, in that boat? Yeah. Oh. Where are you heading? I said, well, towards New Zealand. He said, well, across the Tasman Sea? I said, well, yes, across the Tasman Sea. Christ, mate, you be careful. The Tasman's bloody dangerous. He wasn't the least impressed with the fact I'd sailed all the way from England. No, it's the Tasman. That was the dodgy bit. I went round the bottom of New Zealand in a storm. It was quite a big one. And I couldn't stop. So I had my receiver on. I was listening to the New Zealand radio stations. And they were very intelligently sending me messages, hoping I'd pick it up, which indeed I did. And it basically said that Bruce Maxwell, who was the journalist looking after me from the Mirror, was there, and he was out in a plane looking for me. I thought, you don't want to be flying in this. So I headed up to Dunedin and went round the point there, and I was trying to dodge the tide, and I just slipped aground. So if you like, I wasn't quite non-stop.
Any times you've been really worried for your own safety?
Well, yes, was. But the time I thought the boat was going to break up,
What was that?
about force 10, down in the Southern Ocean, between South Africa and Australia. The waves are hitting us. They're coming from 2 directions. The wind had backed very suddenly, the cold front, and I couldn't get her to run comfortably. And the waves kept hitting it from the side. And quite honestly, it sounded as if someone was dropping an anvil on the deck.
Being on the boat on your own, is there anything you really miss, or what do you want to do when the voyage is over?
Hot bath, steak, egg and chips with, new boiled potatoes, fresh peas, a beautiful juicy sirloin steak, medium rare, 2 eggs, and lemon meringue pie. Oh, and the first thing, a pint of English beer. Christ, I miss English beer.
Footage from Reuters showing Robin Knox Johnston being interviewed off New Zealand in November 1968. And by this point, you'd already broken the record.
I had, actually, although I wasn't particularly conscious of that. I was just keeping going. I mean, this was an annoying interruption to my voyage. I wanted to get back into open water. You know, it's so true. It always gets dangerous when you're close to land. Stay out at sea, it's much safer.
Was there a point when you were close to land where you thought, OK, I've proved a point, I'm going to get off now?
I think it was one Saturday night. I was somewhere in the Great Australian Bight, and I picked up dance music. I thought, what the hell am I doing out here? I should be ashore chasing those Sheilas, whirling them around the dance floor. And then you sit and think, oh, hold it. Would you change with anyone? No. I've got this far. I'm on track. Would I give this up? Like hell I would. Press on, press on.
You were missing for 137 days. Did you know you were missing?
Well, I wasn't missing because I knew where I was. I love that one. Someone came up to me and said, weren't you worried when you were missing? I said, well, I knew where I was, madam. But of course, to the rest of the world, I was missing. My only concern was family and friends. I thought, well, you'll be worried. And there's absolutely nothing I can do. I was desperately trying to get the radio patched up. I got out the circuit diagram. And I did eventually find where the problem was, but I had no solder. So I had to melt down the bottom of a light bulb to give myself something that would act as solder. But there was other problems with it, because when I pressed to transmit, the fuse kept going. I eventually ended up with a nail in the fuse, but it didn't like that. But I could use the receiver, and I was picking out the British Antarctic Survey. And I had a frequency close to theirs, and I found out by listening every time they talked when they started. So I'd try and get the radio to operate, and I would put out a call when they would normally be tuning into each other, and they might just pick me up, slightly off their frequency, but close enough if they were looking for each other, they might hear me. Well, they didn't, so that didn't work. So there was actually nothing I could do unless I saw a ship, and I didn't until off the Azores, to say, I'm fine, I'm just plugging on. I got round the Horn on the 17th of January. Every time I saw a ship, I'd try and call him up. I called up one off the equator when I had appendicitis, and I thought, boy, this may be the last humans I'll see. And I called him up with a lamp, no answer, lit a flare, no answer, fired a distress rocket. He just sailed straight past. Obviously wasn't keeping a lookout. And I thought, oh, that might be the last humans. If this is appendicitis, which it turned out it was, I might be dying. I didn't know.
So how did you treat that?
Well, I didn't have the drugs you need to keep it under control, so I went on a sort of sloppy diet. Didn't eat very much at all. I went on very soft food like porridge and things like that. I didn't eat meat, vegetables or anything like that. And I was doubled up in the cockpit for 3 days. I mean, I was in a lot of pain. And then it began to fade.
And was there a point where you thought, I need to give up?
Well, I was about 10 days from land, you see, and if it was appendicitis, and it obviously was, actually, it was peritonitis, because they whipped my appendix out a year and a half later, and they said it had burst before. I was probably going to die. Well, I don't know why I didn't, but I didn't. But had I been close to a port, I'd have gone in, no question, yeah. Your own life. I mean, it may sound a bit funny, but I don't risk my life stupidly. To me, this voyage wasn't stupid. To others it was. To me it wasn't. This was perfectly possible, providing one just focused on it.
Did you have an escape plan?
Not really. I had a little one-man life raft, but I wasn't going to go very far, was it? Like if I'd drifted 100 miles. I mean, no. The boat's your best protection. Look after the boat.
And were you aware of where the other competitors were?
I had no idea where the other competitors were after New Zealand. I heard of people I'd not heard of before, like Tetley and Crowhurst. They were just names to me. I knew that Ridgway was out, Shea Blythe was out, King was out, Fougeron was out, Caruzzo was out. I knew that. I knew nothing about Crowhurst and Tetley till they mentioned, and Matessio was behind me and was slowing. He'd been very quick down the Atlantic, but he was much slower in the Southern Ocean. So he'd stopped gaining on me very much. But he was very slow considering a bigger boat. And I thought, I can do this. I haven't got it, but I can do this. I keep the pressure up. I can beat him.
And at what point did you know that you'd done it?
I didn't know I'd done it until after the Azores, where I reported. I got hold of a ship and reported. And I passed a French ship and called him up. He said, what ship? And I sent the name. And he turned around and came back. That is most unusual. And he'd obviously heard on the news that I'd been reported the week before. So he was sufficiently interested to come back. And we had a quick conversation. I said, where's Matessier? He said, in the Indian Ocean. I said, no way. I didn't believe this captain, because actually he was telling me the truth. Matessier had pulled out. And so I was the only one. No one else was near to me. But I didn't have the rest of the news. I didn't know where these other two boats in their trimarans were.
So at the point when you knew that it was a one-horse race now, it was a matter of finishing rather than speed?
Well, I didn't really slow up. I mean, I'm still pushing to get in. You know, let's get on with it. Let's get home. Let's see everyone. So I'm still very torn, actually, because part of me said, I don't really want to go back to all that nonsense you get ashore, all the bureaucrats. And part of me was saying, I must get back and see everyone. Won't it be fun? Which is why when people said, of course, Mutessier went mad because he didn't finish, he went on to Tahiti, I said, he wasn't mad in the slightest. He was happy. And I'm probably one of the very few people who understood that.
At what point did you manage to make contact then with the UK and effectively plan your homecoming?
I mean, coming up the North Atlantic, I haven't been across any of the big shipping lanes. I've not seen any ships, but I knew that there was a big shipping lane from basically Gulf of Mexico, Panama, to the Mediterranean, just north of the Azores. And I thought, this is a chance to find a ship and try and get reported. And it was Easter Saturday, actually. I think it was the 5th of April. And I called up 18 ships with the orders. One had to answer, but desultory. And I was getting a bit desperate because, you know, I haven't stopped sailing. I'm not going to stay here with all this shipping around waiting to be rammed. I'm going to carry on heading for England. The best thing I can do is just arrive if necessary. I'll just turn up and people say, who the hell are you? I mean, quite interesting, wouldn't it? But eventually, about 7 o'clock, I called up a ship called the Mobile Acme, British. And the chap on watch signalled back. And, of course, we'd probably been to the same nautical college for our exams. And I suddenly realised he's reading me. The way he's acknowledging, he's getting what I'm saying. I then had to rely on him to do it. Would he do it? Was it, you know, was he going to bother with this little yacht bobbing around in the ocean on Easter Saturday night? You know, what the hell's going on? Well, 20 to 9, my brother picked up the phone from Lloyd's to say, I've been sighted. And actually the Mirror stopped the presses and changed the front page. And the missions to Seaman Padre in Falmouth was this lovely Welshman, Reverend David Roberts, lovely man. And he was giving a sermon. And he leapt up into the pulpit. And he started his sermon by saying, have you heard the news? Robin's been sighted. Most appropriate on the day of the resurrection. And you can't invent these stories. Wonderful man. But apparently it was out, but I didn't know it. But the French ship, which I saw a week later, and got information, he'd obviously heard the news that I'd been sighted. And there was an awful lot going on ashore which I knew nothing about. You know, people were preparing to sort of come out to meet me and all the rest of it. People were trying to find me with aircraft and that sort of thing. And I was just chugging away towards Falmouth, basically.
At what point were you aware that your arrival was going to be an event?
Well, with a slightly repaired but very dodgy transmitter, I could never carry out a conversation like this. I'd get about 3 words out, fuse went. But they were transmitting to me, and that was Baldock in those days, not Portishead. And so they were sending me messages, hoping that I'd pick them up. And so I was picking them up, so I knew what my lot were up to. They said they were going to come out, you know, maintain course and speed. Fine, I was going to do that anyway. Then they started getting worried about all these other boats because they didn't know what mental state I was in. And if I talked to another newspaper, that would have been breach of contract. So I had to be, suddenly, I was back in the real world again, you know, the not so pleasant world, to be frank. So I had to start very quickly adjusting to all this, whoopsie, this sort of newspaper politics that's going on. And it was, actually, it wasn't the most pleasant thing. I think, I don't want this. Now I've had a nice simple life for the last 2.5 months. Now I've got to deal with all this. But it was great to see them when they eventually found me, and then they escorted me in. And then they said, what time are you going to finish? I said, 9 o'clock. And they said, am I slowing up? Well, the Mayor and Mayoress are going to meet you, but the Mayoress has got a hair appointment at 9 o'clock. Okay, so I slowed up. The wind changed. I didn't finish till 3:20 in the afternoon, which time the poor dear's hairstyle was ruined by the wind anyway.
And the cannon has gone. The cannon has gone. The hoodoos, the horns, the salute. Day 312, about 25 past 3 on April the 22nd. And Robin Knox Johnston and Suhaili have sailed non-stop around the world.
And of course I got into the harbour, and the first people to board me were the customs. And they jumped on board, two immaculate customs officers. Good afternoon, Captain, where from? They knew perfectly well where I was from. It was just the age-old question. They were doing it right. And I said Falmouth, and that was it. That was the finish.
And that moment that you stepped off Suhaili onto dry land, what do you remember of that?
Worrying about if I'd be able to stand up, because I hadn't used my legs. And, you know, I very tentatively got out of the boat that took me ashore. And there's a picture of me just feeling to see, and the Commodore of the Royal Cornwall, Mr. Fox, standing there waiting to sort of help me if necessary. And I got there and I was sort of, okay, I'm all right. I'm all right, but I wasn't sure I would be.
And was the reception that you got anything that you'd ever imagined?
No. It was huge, and of course I wasn't expecting it. I'd never seen anything like this before. Bear in mind, I've been at sea all my life. I had no idea about PR or media or anything. This is all a new world to me. And suddenly you're faced with all these people, cameras, people shoving microphones in your face, asking you some good questions, some stupid ones. And, you know, you're trying to be friendly to everyone because you've been away for a long time and you're feeling, you know, fellow humans. And it was, this isn't for me. This isn't me. This isn't my life. All these people and everyone. This isn't me at all. It took me a while to adjust to that, probably a couple of days. But then there were too many people making demands of me, and I only had my brother to protect me. And because my other two brothers had to go back, one to Germany in the army and the other to Lloyd's. And so Mick, the youngest one, was there to sort of protect me, and we were having a hell of a job dealing with it. Everyone was making demands. Oh, you'll come and open our fate, you'll do this, you'll do that. Well, I'll put you down for it. I said, well, hold on a second. Well, I put you down for it. Hold on a second. People can be incredibly unfeeling and rude at times. And you say, I can't do that. See my manager, and that's Mick. And Mick had a little notebook, said, no, and he's got very good at it. So, oh, sorry, he's already down for something then. He was just getting me out of all this. We couldn't deal with it. And so I think after 5 days, got Suhaili out. They'd fitted a new engine, they had to. And we sailed up for London. And going up the Thames was fantastic. I mean, going into Ramsgate, the pontoons were sinking. All the children being let out of school. And as we went up the Thames, the banks were lined with school children, waving. It was quite fantastic.
So to look back on that 312 days of your life, how would you sum that up?
Bittersweet, isn't it? There were bad times, times you don't remember so well, you know, when you were cold, you were miserable, you were hurting, you were bruised. And then there were great times, like sailing through the trade winds. You say, I wouldn't swap with anyone. Sun shining, fluffy blue clouds, the sea's blue, the water's warm. I mean, that's perfect. I look back at it and say, well, the 29-year-old me made the right decision to go. The 29-year-old me was probably almost the best prepared for that voyage. And the 29-year-old me was stubborn enough to just push on. And a number of things contributed to that, be Merchant Navy background, my Northern Irish grandparents who were stubborn as hell, and I lived with for a while, who taught me a lot, and my training as a merchant seaman, and the fact I knew my boat. That gave me a huge advantage over a lot of them. So I think it was an interesting thing to have done. It certainly changed my life. I never regretted doing it, of course. Faced with that opportunity today, will I go for it? And the chances are, if I could find it, I probably would still.
You're listening to Robin Knox Johnston, A Force of Nature, a special programme marking the 50th anniversary of his epic voyage.
BBC Radio Solent.
Do you still get the same thrill being on board Suhaili now as you always did?
Well, do you know, the thrill is far greater if I can do what I really like doing, is putting the sails out and not having to take them down at the end of the day, which is what one does in one's day sailing.
Yeah.
I like to put them up and take them down a fortnight later because it's less work and I'm idle. So actually, I much prefer going on a longer journey. So pottering around the Solent is fun, and if we're just going pottering for the sake of the weekend, say, and we're just going to go and anchor. The lovely thing about the Solent, we have got some nice anchorages on Osborne Bay, Newtown Creek, if it's not too crowded. It's a lovely place. Go to one of these places, drop the anchor, and have a quiet evening. It's very pleasant, very relaxing. So, I'm happy enough doing that. My daughter will come out with me quite often. She's good with this boat. She knows the boat well. Her youth was ruined by having to spend her holidays on Suhaili. She resented it bitterly as a young child. She doesn't seem to mind quite so much nowadays, but at the time she objected to it.
Well, grandson Xavier is on the helm at the moment, and can you imagine being on your own going around the world?
Absolutely not. I think I'd go nuts, to be honest.
But how does it feel to be at the helm of such a famous boat?
Well, it's quite hard to picture what it would have been like, but it's nice that it's still here. It's nice that she's still around for us to go out on. I like to when we can, but she's been out for a while, so we haven't really been able to.
Any plans to follow Grandad's footsteps?
Well, I don't think to the extent of going around the world on my own, but yeah, I'm quite keen on maybe doing transatlantic at some point in my life. That interests me. I'd like to be the record. That would be quite good.
That must make you feel proud, Robin.
I'm all for it, but I feel that they've got to make the choices they want to make with their lives, and if sailing doesn't appeal, then don't do it, and if it does, do it. But we've had all of us out, all the grandsons out together with Suhaili at times, and more or less camped on board for a few days, and I think it's been something I've certainly enjoyed, and I think they've got happy memories of it.
Since winning the Golden Globe race, Robin has circumnavigated the globe 3 times. He was awarded a CBE in 1969 and knighted in 1995. He also founded a new race around the world. The Clipper race gives members of the public a chance to follow in his footsteps. To mark the 50th anniversary of his historic voyage, the Golden Globe is being restaged. This time, however, it will start in France.
Neil, to be honest with you, I'm very disappointed. Falmouth was given the chance, turned it down. Well, wanted a lot of money, which the organisers didn't have. Plymouth the same. One of the contestants, a very experienced French sailor who I've known for 30 years, lives in Le Sable, where the Vendée takes off. And he went to the people and said, why don't we offer to take the race on? They immediately come back. Free berthing, free office, money to help run the race, an office for the time they're there, free apartments for all of us going over for the start. So I'm sailing Suhaili over, and I've got an apartment for me and my crew to live in. Well, you can't hire a room anywhere near Le Sable right now. So the whole area is being engulfed by people coming to see the start of this race. Now that brings in people using the hotels, using the B&Bs, using the restaurants, using the taxis, buying stuff in the shops. And you think, here's 50th anniversary, and you've thrown it away. Now, you haven't completely thrown it away, because we're going to go to Falmouth, and we're going to sail on the 14th. But they could have had so much more, and you think, what a shame.
The criteria to enter this race was very strict, wasn't it?
The criteria to enter the race isn't particularly strict. I mean, they're going back to old-fashioned rules. The great thing about this race is it's not £5 million a boat. It's 30, 40,000. These boats that are doing it, by the restrictions in the race, are the sort of boats you see out with the average cruising family. They're the sort of boats the average yachtsman can identify with. They can afford. You can say, actually, I could do that. If I can buy a caravan, I can buy that boat. Therefore, it is possible for me to go out and do that if I want to. So I think, in a way, what this race is doing, and I'm a spectator. I mean, I said I'll start them, but I'm not involved in the organisation. But in a way, what it's doing, it's going back to adventure sailing, and it's opening up opportunities which have largely grown beyond the reach of the average sailor. And I've always supported that.
Is there going to be a part of you, when starting that race, that wishes you were on the start line?
Well, I happily say right this minute, certainly not. You know, I've got that T-shirt, I've bought it. However, how can I say, as I watch them all set off, and I'm saying, actually, ask me on the day.
What's your message to the skippers who are getting themselves ready now to take part in that race?
Well, if you'd asked me that a year ago, I'd have said go out and get as much time in the boat as you can, get to know your boat. It's too late for that. They either know their boats or they don't, and they should know them, they should have made the effort. I think the message to them is don't let one accident, one bad day put you off. Go through it. That if you give up because of that, you're giving up the you who got yourself that far. So don't let it happen. So just keep going, but above all, care for your boat. If you care for the boat, you'll be safe. If you start caring for yourself more than the boat, you're probably risking your life.
Is it any easier to do it now?
In some ways, I think it might be harder, because they're going to have, for them, a greater degree of deprivation than I had. You see, we're so used to our mobile phones these days, aren't we? We're so used to all the things we've got, satellites and the like. We didn't have that when I was going around. So I was losing less, if you like, whereas they're losing more when they go. So they're going to have greater deprivation.
You've been listening to Robin Knox Johnston of Force of Nature. To hear the full conversation with Sir Robin, download our free H2O podcast. It's available now from the BBC Radio Solent website and from all podcast providers.